Hello and welcome to Re-enthused. Today we are taking a look at some of, the first part really of Amstrad's home computer range. So more dealing with the smaller micros rather than their professional PCW ones, etc. The first machine we're looking at, well, let's set the story for that one. It was the early 1980s and the UK was experiencing a boom in the computer market, specifically the home computer market, with several manufacturers releasing their own machines and the market was noticeably growing. This caught the interest of Alan Sugar, who had decided he needed to move into more markets to increase his profits. Now, his company Amstrad, which stands for Alan Michael Sugar Trading, good old Alan. It specialised in making affordable versions of electronics, specifically really, or mostly at least, high-end Japanese hi-fi systems and stuff. But these were made at a much lower cost and they were never going to be as good as those versions, but that wasn't really the point. The point was they were good enough and they were affordable. And so people would get things that looked vaguely like these high-end systems for a price they could actually afford, which made Amstrad quite successful in that market. But when it came to the computer market, he realised that wasn't quite going to work the same way. Whilst, yeah, he could definitely make machines as affordable as possible, he was really going to have to also fight on the merits of his machines. I think especially if you kind of read between the lines, he had a bit of an issue with Sir Clive Sinclair as well. So the thought of putting a machine into market that was more successful than Sinclair's machines, but not because of price, but because of literal quality, I think was probably high up on his agenda as well. Some proof to this. Part of this comes from a quote from Sugar himself, where he actually remarked that he wants his computers to look like real computers and not pregnant calculators, which was almost certainly aimed at the ZX80 and the ZX81. So Sugar talked to Ivor Spital and told him to basically go and check the market out and see what their options were as far as entering it. And he did, and he got a lot of information on the other people in the market, on the manufacturing costs, on where you can get parts from. And he basically said, yep, we should definitely do this. We can definitely make an affordable machine, a machine that's less than £200, and we can put in a monitor as well so that it can be its own little unit rather than little Timmy having to use his parents' TV. They could be using it more often. The machine that's used more often becomes more profitable because, especially when you've got software sales in that as well. Initially, Spital kind of spec'd up a 6502 base machine, and they got a couple of developers, a couple of hardware engineers involved to try to develop this machine based around the 6502 processor. Now, it's a fairly popular processor, and if you look at the machines it was contained in, you can kind of see why Amstrad were looking at that. It had a fairly high profile. It was in the Commodore 64, it was in the BBC Micro, it was in the Apple II. So these were all machines that had really made their mark on the industry. So you can kind of understand why they looked at that as being a machine that people would take more seriously. However, a lot of issues came about. This whole machine was being made at a very accelerated time frame, which we'll get into in a minute. And the initial developers had basically said they could do that, they could do it in this amount of time, but they couldn't. There was no way. One of the developers got so stressed out that he literally collapsed from exhaustion, and the father had to take him away to recuperate somewhere. So they had to look at other options. They brought on a company called Ambit to consult on the process of making both the hardware side and the software side work. Ambit was a company run by Roland Perry and William Pohl, and they're fairly synonymous with the CPC range for the very reason that they literally made it happen pretty much. They shopped around for somebody to make the actual software for the system, because obviously once that's done, then it kind of helps to inform what the hardware is going to be. It's a give and take situation. Now, Roland Perry had a friend in Acorn, manufacturers obviously of the BBC Micro, and they recommended a small company called Locomotive Software, who were based in Dorking. They visited them, and these guys had just been writing lots of Z80 software for Acorn, for their Z80 add-on for their BBC Micros, and so they had the groundwork done for a Z80 basic already, and so that kind of pushed the whole process forward. So they would be developing a Z80 basic for a Z80 machine now, and so the move from 6502 to Z80 was done. So everything was in place, as was Alan Sugar's general way of doing things. He'd already signed off on the actual visual design of the machine. He'd got the tooling made to make the case. The tape recorder player was already in place on the machine, which you'll see in a minute if you've never seen a 464. So literally, the PCB was being made to fit an already existing form, which I guess in a way, whilst it's constricting for the PCB designer, they at least have already something, they know what they have to fit the components around already. So that, in that way, it's kind of good. And this is all part, again, of this accelerated time frame. So the Locomotive Software had 12 weeks to make their basic, and the whole thing was done in 9 months. So literally 9 months after Amstrad began this process, Alan Sugar called a press event to launch the 464. And that's an absolutely astonishing feat of engineering to go from being completely not in the market at all and using experienced partners, which was something that Alan Sugar was especially very, very good at, was using experienced partners to help him get a product into the production. But that's to take a computer idea, design it, go through 2 iterations of design as well, the 652 and then the Z80, and then to actually release it in the space of 9 months and successfully release it as well. So the 464 was being released around the same time as the Sinclair QL, which was supposed to be Sinclair's follow-up to the Sinclair Spectrum. And that machine had failed miserably to be released. It missed 2 deadlines. The final versions it released were incredibly buggy because it had been rushed through because Sinclair had basically given a release date which had no bearing at all to the engineering task at hand. Whereas Sugar had literally broken that process down and said, these steps should take this long. This is how long we've got to do it. And he had, instead of announcing, we're going to be in the market at this point, he had told everyone we have to be ready at this point. And then when it became obvious they were going to be ready, then he kind of announced that it was going to be out there. A very, very different way of doing things. And I guess kind of the reason, let's be honest, why, as much as I love Sir Clive, and I genuinely do, as you've seen in a lot of my videos, I credit him strongly for me being in the computer industry at all because of the Sinclair Spectrum. But that's the big difference between Sir Clive Sinclair and Alan Sugar. Alan Sugar was a very good businessman. I mean, we can take the mickey out of a lot of the stuff he does now, like the emailer and things like that, and his Twitter record. But he was a good businessman, and he knew how to get products to market, and he knew how to get himself the right people, to do the right stuff. In fact, the case in point on this is the ULA for the 464 was being made by Ferranti. And Ferranti's process, which had already caused issues for Acorn with the Electron at this point, was also causing issues with the 464. They just couldn't get the way that Amstrad needed the ULA to work, and the process that Ferranti used to make chips just wasn't meshing, didn't work. So they effectively had 2 options. They could either redesign the ULA to work differently so it did work with Ferranti's process, or they could strip down the ULA and add a ton more components, which would make the actual machine more expensive. Neither of these things sat well with Alan Sugar, so he literally just wrote off the amount of money he owed Ferranti for doing what they'd done already and just went to a different manufacturer. In fact, he went to 2 different manufacturers because he fell out with the original one, and then eventually SGS in Italy made the ULA. But that was a very ballsy move for someone to do. It was costing him money already, but he knew what he wanted to release, and he was literally willing to write off that cost to release what he had decided upon. An incredible tactic, and it did end up with a machine that released in 9 months, was out on time when Sugar said this is when we're going to release it. It was released, it shipped to shops. He got everything in place so that the traditionally very Spectrum, Sinclair, heavy retailers like WH Smith's were willing to buy lots of stock up front of the CPC range and actually stock it as well, which was, although Sinclair didn't do anything to get it to happen, they generally kind of stocked more Spectrum stuff than anything else. Even the Commodore 64 suffered slightly from that. So to get that done, that took a lot of work. And when the machine was released, it was rock solid. It just worked. And it genuinely does. I mean, I've got the machines I've got in front of me now, do just work, and they work straight away. One doesn't, but there's a reason for that, and it's not the fault of the design. We'll get into that in a minute. So yeah, it was just to look at the incredible amount of work done to get this. It was just an amazing feat of engineering, which is really not remarked upon a lot. Locomotive Software, I would say, the basic, they could have just shipped a basic that worked, so the machine booted up into something, could load games, and that was it. But they didn't. They looked at what the Amstrad were trying to release, at the abilities they were trying to give it, and they properly tailored the basic around that. So the basic in the Amstrad 464 is probably one of the most advanced basics that had been released at that point. It could do all kinds of stuff that no other basics could. And they did that in 12 weeks. And it's, again, an astonishing feat, which just really doesn't seem to ever be remarked about. Anyway, yeah, the 464 was eventually released on the 21st of June 1984 on time, and it was released in two SKUs, two unit types. The first one came bundled with a colour monitor, and that was released for about £349, and the other with a green monochrome screen for about £239. Incredible prices for a machine that came with a monitor. I mean, you would not have got any other computers for that price with a monitor at that time. Now, we get to the games, and this is kind of where things start to fall apart a little bit for the 464, and it's entirely not the 464's fault. The 464 was an incredible machine, a very powerful machine for its time. But in the UK, and also slightly in Spain as well, the Spectrum had become the dominant machine. And because of that, especially when you talk in terms of Z80 machines as well, because of that, a lot of the games publishers were not willing to throw a lot of money at other machines. And so the Amstrad was cursed with lots and lots of lazy ports. The MSX also had exactly the same issue, where it was a fairly powerful machine, but the Spectrum versions were generally the first development version, and then they were ported across to those two machines. So yeah, they're never great. They're never good versions. They usually look like the Spectrum version, which, let's be honest, isn't the greatest looking machine ever. But also they're slower, because a lot of the stuff the Spectrum did with its display was quite clever, but mostly to cut down costs. But it actually meant it could do a lot of stuff quite quickly. And if you didn't do it correctly for other machines, it just meant you had a slower game. So you don't really see the power of the 464 when you base it on the UK market. However, the 464, the Amstrad machines, full stop actually, were very popular across Europe. I mean, they sold out nearly 2 million units, possibly over 2 million units across Europe. And they were especially popular in France, but also in Germany, where they were distributed by Schneider. And so if you look at the games that came, especially from France, you genuinely get an idea of what the actual machine was capable of. And they do look fantastic as well when you look at those games. Now, I never knew any of this because as a kid, as I've said many times before, I was a specky boy. And because fanboy wars existed, even back then in the dawn and distant time of my youth when I had hair, if you liked the Spectrum, that was it. The Spectrum was the greatest machine, and there was no argument. It didn't matter what the box art and what reviewers said, the Spectrum was always the best machine. Now, as a growing adult, where I get the benefit of being able to buy whatever machines I want to buy, and being an owner of all of them pretty much now, or the ones that are available in this era, I know the Spectrum was by far not the best machine for games in that era. And I've kind of really grown a love for the Amstrads. I would put the Amstrad as being the best machine of that era, because certainly of the big three, because it just has, when you use the proper games, it's just got so much untapped power inside it, and the sound was pretty good as well. It could really throw graphics around, really do very good scrolling when it was done properly as well as that. So it was genuinely a great machine. And I put the Commodore second, to be honest. Again, we used to take the mick out of it. say just everything looked brown was basically the big argument with the Commodore. But again, when you look at some of the really, really good games for the Commodore 64, it was just capable of so much more than the Spectrum. However, the Spectrum will always be my heart because it's the machine I grew up with and got me on my things. But it will always still be my favourite machine. But as a realist, I can see in terms of games, it wasn't the best choice. Now, this wasn't obviously the end of the Amstrad systems. It went on to do other machines. The 664 was released, which replaced the floppy drive with 3-inch disk drive, a machine we'll see again. If you look at my Plus 3 video, that's all my Tatung Einstein video, the 3-inch discs feature in that. And then eventually the 128K model came out, so the 6128 128K with a disk drive as well. There was also obviously the Spanish version, which had an extra few K on board, which wasn't used, but was just there to get around the greater than 64K limit that were on import tariffs that Spain had put up. I think I mentioned that in my Plus 3 review, and it's a nice bit of duty avoidance by Amstrad. So yeah, I guess, another machine actually, before the other machines after that, they also eventually released the Plus models, so the CPC Plus models, which radically changed the design as well to make them kind of more akin to the Atari ST Amstrad style of design, but also improve the graphics and a lot of other things as well. And from that came the GX4000, Amstrad's very failed console, which is a machine I would absolutely, definitely cover at some point. I personally love it. I know I'm not the only one in the retro community, but when you actually get to playing it and you make sure you don't use a dodgy power supply, it has some great games on it, especially some of the ones now that have been backported from the other the CPC Plus range. And it has some very nice games that have been released at the right time. It probably been done quite well. I'll cover that when I do that. When I do that review. Right. Well, let's take a little look at the machine first, and then we'll go on to some games. Here they are in all their multicoloured glory. And they are very colourful machines. So I've got two here. There was slightly different designs. I'm guessing one came after the other. I don't know. I'll be honest, I don't know which is which. Certainly on the bottom, they're very different. This one has a very professional sticker, whereas this one... it's kind of, it's a professional sticker. Well, that's the more professional one, sorry. That's with the serial number properly written in, whereas this one, go back to this one, has kind of a separate label, the serial number. So I'm guessing they were just made at slightly different times. But yeah, you can see they're very colourful. The overall kind of dark grey design, but with the highlighted keys is very pleasing. I like it quite a lot. And here's the built-in disk drive as well. This is the thing that mainly goes wrong with these machines. Sometimes more than other times. So this one's had a belt replaced. That's the thing that goes. There's a couple of belts in here, one that runs the timer and one that actually runs the mechanism itself. They both will probably need replacing if this machine has been sitting around for too long, because they just turned to goo. This one especially, I had to practically take all the things apart just to get all the goo out. This one is the first one I ever bought, and I got it from the eBay with the usual "this has not been tested" tag. When I received it, I found out that the mechanism had actually gone from the tape system. There's literally just enough to hold the spindles in, the rest of it's missing. So, to be fair, it would have been very hard to test it without a tape mechanism. So I guess they told the truth there. Anyway, what I did for this one, because I had no tape mechanism, is I made these two holes at the back. So that's a tape ear and a tape remote. So I can use an external tape player, or indeed Casduino, which is what I do use more often. Whereas this one is unmodified. Nothing wrong there. Although you will see there is slight differences to the back as well. So if we look here, you can kind of see all of these ports are now over here on this machine. The user port has entirely gone, as has the this I/O port it's marked as, which I think was maybe a tape in. I don't know. I guess not, because I did that. Who knows? Yeah, the printer port's over here, and this has been moved over here as well. So there were subtle differences to the design. Actually, the way this is done, I would assume that this was made after the 664, because that's very similar changes to what the 664 had. Oh, there you go. Sorry, the user port and the I/O port are now on the side. The user port being obviously a joystick port, sorry. So yeah, it's pretty obvious that was going to be there. On this side, which should be the same as the other one, is the on-off switch and the volume button for the tape. The on-off switch is also a thing that goes wrong, but usually it just needs a bit of cleaning. And yeah, the other machine has the exact same thing on that side, and obviously nothing on that side because those are on the back. Really should have looked at these before I started filming it. Oh well. They're very tasteful machines. I like the design quite a lot. The very plain dark grey is really broken up quite nicely by highlighting all the special buttons. I've kind of prefer this label to this one. I'm assuming, this is a later machine because of the changes they've made. I do kind of prefer this raised Amstrad on here rather than the flat highlighted sticker there. But yeah, an on-off power line. That had also broken on this machine as well. But I'm guessing just because it's connected to where the tape drive goes, and so when they're removing all the bits from inside it, they broke the light off at the same time. Easy enough fix, of course. Just have to resolder it. Yeah, so we didn't really go through the ports that well, did we? So this is a monitor port. You can reuse it quite easily. There are a lot of leads available to do so. Now, generally, this power was supposed to come from the monitor, so you effectively plug all the power into the monitor, and the monitor gives you these two cables to actually connect to the machine and power it. These can all be bought separately now, fortunately, as separate things, so you don't have to have the monitor, and the port in the back will give you quite a nice picture, especially through something like an OSSC or even a RetroTink. So, a fascinating machine. I'm quite fond of it. I think I'm quite fond of the style as well. They are very bulky and very big. Obviously, the Plus one's even more so, to be honest. But they're still, very nice. Just hard to store. These need a lot of cleaning. As you can see, a lot of stuff in my room does because I've been drilling a lot and I didn't cover them properly. My bad. But I will resolve that. Right. Let's try playing a few games. This might take a while to get working, but, you won't know because it'll be a jump cut. See you in a minute. Right, so here we are with Prince of Persia. And this is a long load, let me tell you. I mean, it looks pretty good. I mean, obviously it lacks the definition that some of the other versions have, but of the 8-bit versions, I say it looks pretty bloody good. But it also moves really quick, and the animation is, I'd say, spot on. I am just using the keyboard. But I would imagine it will be just as good if you were using a joystick. But yeah, I mean, that looks pretty dead on to me. Same hanging and everything. But yeah, it's a really, really good version. Yes, certainly I'd say better than any other 8-bit version going. Hold the shift key down to gently move. There we go. The movement is very precise as well. Didn't have any problems getting that. Little rabbit drop. Okay, how do you pick up things? Alright, don't know how to pick up things, but... Oh, there we go. You don't duck down, that's how. We can just kind of edge our way to there. And then... Oops, forgot to press up, okay. And that just tells me to press shift to start again. But yeah, no, it's a really, really good conversion. It's got some nice sound. The music, which I'll hopefully play the snippet off if I remembered, was really nice, and the sound effects are all there. Yeah, no, a good game. Let's move on to the next one. And here we are with Contra. Well, as you can see, it's called Grisel there, but it's Contra. And this is another really, really good port of a game. So let's start. 3, 2, 1. And yeah, it's just a really, really colourful game. All I do is remember the keys. There we go. Lots of cameras action. Obviously a flip screen, not scrolling, but that's whilst the Amstrad did have some very, very nice scrolling in some games, it wasn't a strength of the Z80 based machines for whatever reason. But it's a really colourful game. It's very, very fast. It's very responsive. The collision detection is pretty good. Yeah, just a pretty game, really, with and very, very playable. Shoot that guy. Again, this is probably one of the best 8-bit ports of this game, ignoring obviously the consoles, but certainly in the home computer market. Right, I think that's it. I really do like the Amstrad. Again, I was brought up where in a neighbourhood which, was quite poor, so we had Spectrums because they were the cheapest option, and the playground was full of Spectrum owners, so therefore the Spectrum was the best thing ever. So I never really got to know about the Amstrad at all until later on, and it's really channels like Chinny Vision that have kind of pushed me to push on and find more about the Amstrad and to actually get more games for it, and I'm really glad I did. I picked these up at auction. They're relatively affordable, the 464 model anyway. You can generally pick them up. The thing you should be looking for is the tape drive being broken, but that is again just usually the belt that's gone a bit wonky, and you can still get those on eBay easily enough. And yeah, it's not too hard to do the surgery requires to have an external port. There are some SD solutions. I do not have one. I need to look one up. Again, Chinny Vision has pointed me in a direction which I will be checking out at some point. But yeah, it's a genuinely good machine, and if you're into retro computers, definitely well worth picking up. Right, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit like. If you really enjoyed the video, please hit subscribe. If you didn't enjoy the video or you have something else to say, then please leave it in the comments below. See you next time.